So I'm just going to talk very briefly, 12 minutes to be exact, actually 10 now, about my experience as an elementary school principal. And I will tell you that when I saw those first statistics about abuse, about neglect, about the different ACEs or adverse childhood experiences that kids bring to them into schools, I started picturing faces of children. And I'll never forget, in January of 2015, I was at the Martin Professional Development Center listening to a talk from a Vanderbilt professor and an assistant principal from Washington, D.C. And they started talking about this thing called ACEs. And I remember the feeling, I remember the tightness in my chest, I remember going, this is it. And I'll never forget the moment that I had the opportunity at that point to do two things. We come in a crossroads in all of our careers where we're given information and we have two options. We can do one. We can act upon the information that we've received and we can do something different. Or we can accept the information that we received and we can continue onward on the path we're going. And I will tell you, as an elementary school principal of a very high needs school, I can't imagine being in a better place. My kids walk in every single day ready to be at school. Some of them want to be at school because it is their safe place. They're welcomed with hugs. Yes, we hug children in my school. They're welcome with high fives. They're welcome with fist bumps. They're always welcome with a smiling face. And I can tell you, when we learned this as a school, I brought it to my staff and faculty because we all know this work is about adults, yes? This work is about changing our paradigm, not changing children. This work is about shifting systems, fixing systems, not fixing children. This work is about healing children who have had relational damage by giving them positive relational interventions. And so my school decided we have two options, act or accept. When I brought this back to my staff, we talked about ACEs right off of the bat. We talked about what our adverse childhood experiences, what is trauma, how does it play out in our schools. Some kids withdraw, some kids act out. And I asked them, if what we're doing is working? And they all looked at me and said, no. What we were doing to kids wasn't about what we should be doing for kids. Writing an office referral wasn't an intervention. It wasn't a relationship builder. Sending a child home was taking a child that already felt disconnected and created disconnection. It was about compliance and making sure kids did school as opposed to being safe at school. So once we chose to act, things began to change. My faculty and staff began to change. They saw children for who they were on the fundamental level. We started hearing stories. We started having parents coming in saying, can you support? Can you help? We started seeing a paradigm shifting in my adults where it truly was about students. I remember sitting in an office during an IEP meeting and the parent is always asked, has there ever been any trauma? And the parent said, no. And then she said, hold on a minute. What do you mean by trauma? And I knew the family. I knew their story. I wasn't going to expose anything of their story because that's theirs. It's not mine to share. And it began very evidently that the parent didn't realize things that they were experiencing was abnormal. And I remember the tears coming down her face. And I remember the tears coming down my face. Because yes, I cry with my families. I laugh with my families. I hug my families. Because I care about my families. And I remember the conversation of saying, you know what? We have your back. I remember the teacher saying, you know what? Don't worry. We have your back. I remember seeing children walking down the hall that prior I would feel angst with at the very beginning of my principal career, because I was a true principal. I walked down the hall with a puffed up chest. I said, walk in the halls. I sent kids home when they misbehaved, because that's what I thought I should do. And I remember the change that happened when I thought, this is not helping anybody. It's not supporting anyone. Matter of fact, I remember as a child, as a student, remember the word obnoxious. I remember my principal saying, you know what, Portell? Sometimes you're just obnoxious. And that moment clicked into my brain at one point in school, and I remember seeing a child's face, and he was looking at me as if I had hung the moon. And he was disruptive. I had a choice. Sit down next to him on the floor and ask him the question, buddy, what is wrong with you? Or, buddy, what's happened to you? And I'll never forget that what's happened to you is his behavior stemmed from something that didn't happen at school. It was in the morning. It was a subtle little piece that had wrecked his complete day, that sent him to school in fight and flight. This young man never froze. He always fought. And so that began the healing. It began the relationship between he and I. It began the work of my school where I started seeing this manifest itself. We were very, very fortunate to be one of the recipients of the Building Stronger Brains grants. We had a trauma-informed practitioner come into our school who was a therapist. I followed her around like a puppy dog because I swore she was going to pull out the magic wand. You all know the magic wand, right? She would walk around and kids would just stop. And I quickly realized the power of co-regulation and de-escalation. Understanding that my staff now understands that if I am not in control of me, my child will never be able to de-escalate. That I have to pull a child into my calm as opposed to being pulled into their storm. How many parents do we have in the room? How many let you pull your children pull you into their storm? How many it happened this morning? We know the feeling. Now imagine 25 kids with needs that you have to meet. So I tell you that this journey as a trauma-informed school takes a lot of work. First of all, you have to shift the paradigm of the adult. It has to go from compliance to relationship, from compliance to support. The interventions that we first started with were relationship-based interventions. Mentoring, letting kids check in and check out with their adult every day. I still have mine. He's in 5th grade. I talk to him often. When there's a problem at school, guess who his mom calls? Me. I'm not his principal anymore. But he knows because he said, Mr. Portell, you said you're always going to be my principal. And I said, that is the case. You will always have high accountability with me. The second thing that we learn, it's not just about relationships. In the South, we have a little statement. How many of you know it? Bless their little hearts. We can't bless little hearts. We have to love and support little hearts, but also ask for high accountability. This doesn't mean kids get to do whatever they want when they want, and that's something I hear all the time when I talk about my school. No. It means that if you're having a rough day because something has happened, you're not going to come to school and get hammered with punishment. You're going to get a hug, you're going to get a conversation, and you're going to get a listening ear of an adult who cares about you. The other piece is we have to understand and measure outcomes. We have to know what we're doing is working. So in my school, we take the time to look at our interventions, to understand the impact. and what works. Lastly, we all make mistakes. I'm going to share one little story with you before I exit the stage, and it's about a mistake. So I was in the front office one morning. How many of you have been in the front office at a school before? Oh my goodness, it's like air traffic controlling. And this young lady who I adore, she's 80 years old, but she's only in a 6-year-old body. She's like everybody's grandma. Kind of off topic, but not. I remember the time she walked into my office and she said, and I quote, "Mr. Portell, your office is a mess." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, it is." But she was very escalated. She has 7 brothers and sisters. I know the family very well. She came in really, really escalated. And a child bumped into her. And when the child bumped into her, she immediately reacted. She went after the child. Before I realized it, I had raised my voice and I'd yelled so loud, and I yelled her name, and I saw the look. You know what look I'm talking about. Freeze. I'm in danger. And I'll never forget the feeling that I thought, I just re-traumatized this sweet, amazing little child. And so I went to her, and I brought her back and got her calmed down, and I said, told her her name, and I said, "I am so sorry that I did that. I should never have raised my voice at you. Will you forgive me?" And just like my wife, she responded with, "I'll think about it." And so I gave her that time to think about it. She was in class, sitting, and I went down, bent down on my knee next to her, and I said her name, "Have you thought about it?" And she said, "Yes. And I left a note in your mailbox." And so I carry this note dated 8/15/2018. I carry it with me everywhere so I can understand that I make mistakes, yet I can fix them even with kids. And the note simply reads, in her handwriting, "Mr. Portell, I accept your apology. Mr. Portell, thank you." This is what trauma-informed schools are about. Meeting kids where they are, supporting them how they need to be, and saying sorry when we make mistakes. Thank you.